talk about another writer whose works will probably basically be forgotten. And because of that, I feel drawn to talk about him because I liked this author's books and they meant something to me. His name is Thomas Dygard, and he wrote sports fiction for kids. Um, at least that's what I know him for. He may well have written other things under other names, even, and I have not looked it up. But what I want to talk about is his sports novels for kids. And by kids, I mean kids probably like, uh, you know, 10 to 15. Uh, like those years. Not really little kids. These were novels, and I appreciated them a lot at the time, and I reread some of them. I had read a lot of sports novels as a kid. I started with Matt. I loved sports, especially baseball. I read Matt Christopher a lot. I'd read. I want to say there was like this series about these brothers who all were like trying to make it to the big leagues together. I'd read John Tunis, and I read this guy Thomas Dygard. His books were about like the standard length for a youth novel. The young adult category didn't really exist yet. I guess these would fit in there today. Um, and now that I'm an adult and thinking back on them, I think they stand out. They were unusually well told. I don't think I'm making that up. Um, they tended to have similar plots to a lot of sports novels, where you were in the head of one person the whole book, usually a player, but occasionally a coach, who was making some difficult decisions, and sort of trying to find some way to victory. And I remember that what struck me about these is, first, they were not there were real challenges in the stories, the kinds that I felt were more common in adult fiction, and they did not admit to easy solutions, and there were no Deus Ex Machina. If the characters achieved something, you felt like they had worked for it. You got to see the work. They usually did often win, or at least win in some measure of the word win, but it was the kind of winning in sports books where it's like the win is not always the the formal victory in the sporting event. Sometimes the win is just showing that we could do the thing, that we could make it to the tournament, not necessarily win the tournament. That my idea was a good idea. That putting this guy in this position would be good for him as an athlete. So you learn to look for the not quite expected payoff, where something would be set up. As a kid, when you're reading books to little kids, the stories you read, the setup and payoff is pretty visible because kids don't mind that. It's like, I'm going to find my hat. Oh, look, I found my hat. And then the Matt Christopher stuff is like, I wonder if I'll be able to play well enough to beat these guys. Oh, if I practice a lot, I can play well enough to beat these guys. And then you look for other kinds of payoff, though, for more complex novels. You look for, like, side characters. You look for, like, a little reflection. You look for a good scene between two characters that builds the story. And you don't necessarily need to have the immediate expected payoff. It can be a little bit different. And that's what I remember Thomas Dygard's books having. And in that sense, they were probably a really good bridge between fiction for little kids and fiction for adults. Is this fiction for youth that teaches you to not be so sure you know where the story is going. We forget that we had to learn that. We forget that we had to learn to enjoy that feeling. That feeling of really not quite knowing where things are going to the same degree. That stokes our sense of, what happens next, what happens next, and then to accept that things could go in many different ways. And when you get to taste for that in fiction, I think it may be, valuable for real life, this sense of, many things are possible. There are many different kinds of outcomes. They are not all simply positive, negative on a single scale. There are many different ways in which we can move the story forward, move the play forward. And with the structure of sports, like a game or a season, giving sort of automatic structure to the plot of the book, you're free to explore other elements of it. I also remember Dygard writing a flat-out, really fun thriller for youth about these guys who it sort of was like Fargo meets DB Cooper, but for like 15-year-olds. These guys are out in the Boundary Waters on a canoe trip, these two like older teens, and they find a satchel full of money, and they work out like that it belongs to this criminal, and they try to grab it and get out of the Boundary Waters before he can catch up with them. And it just has this great sense of like outdoor adventure mixed with crime, and the automatic threat of a determined and sort of amoral adult when placed against these two not quite adult, big kids. It was really good. It was kind of like if Gary Paulson did a Stephen King or story. So I want to thank him for that. I don't know if he's still with us, and I don't know if he wrote anything else, but I think he did a better than needed to do job on these books, and I appreciate that. He could have turned in something simpler, but in general, he gave good weight to the decisions without being too heavy-handed. He let stories and characters have unexpected moments, good or bad, and just generally stoked my appetite as a reader for a broader range in the novel. So thank you, Thomas Dygard. All the best.